they gather for a blessing from the mountain's traditional guardians. The Aymara Indians say to ascend this 6,000-metre peak without absolution is to incur the wrath of the gods.
Yo creo que no están enojados, digamos, solo que están, digamos, no están, digamos, hablando, porque nos hablan. Nos hablan, digamos, de que tenemos que, digamos, convivir con la naturaleza y no haga más industria, no haga más contaminaciones. Entendemos el mundo así, digamos, de no contaminar, podemos todavía sobrevivir un tiempito más.
On the arid western side of the Andes mountain range, snow and ice mean water, and water is life. Now this icy realm is melting before their very eyes.
Que inda se dais para mí ante Dios nuestro Señor. Qué grande es el sol que nos acompañó en una parte de la subida. Y qué altura. ¿No? ¿Saben yo cómo hemos subido? ¡Oh, Dios! ¡Qué grande eres tú! ¡Oh, Dios! Del Espíritu Santo. Amén.
But their prayers remain unanswered. The Aymara call this place Chacaltaya, meaning cold road. In modern times, Bolivians proudly boasted that this glacier, at nearly 5,500 meters, was the world's highest ski run. But no longer. These days, it looks more like a resort on the moon. Glaciologist Dr. Edson Ramirez guides us towards a sad sliver of ice.
So, this is it?
This is Chacaltaya.
That's all that's left?
Absolutely.
Yeah? How many years before this is gone?
I think that's only 1 to 2 years.
So Edson, this is the old ski lodge?
Yes.
All right, you've got a lot of old pictures here.
Inside the lodge, memories of bygone days, when Chacaltaya was a playground for Bolivia's wealthy.
We can see the Chacaltaya Glacier in 1914.
The ice used to go right down to the,
yes,
to the road down the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the road.
So when did people stop skiing here?
I think it's in 1998, and we are here.
Now should be the peak skiing season, yet there are only rocks. At this altitude, there's only half the oxygen of sea level. For the unacclimatized, it's hard enough just breathing, let alone attempting a downhill run. But it's all in a day's work for Edson Ramirez. Bolivia is losing more than just its only ski field. Small, high-altitude glaciers act as water reservoirs for millions of people who live in arid regions of the Andes.
How many other glaciers are melting like this?
I think that it's around 80% of the glaciers on the Cordillera Real, because the Chacaltaya is representative of this kind of glaciers.
Edson Ramirez and a team of French scientists have been documenting Chacaltaya's decline for 15 years. At first, their observations were treated with skepticism. Now, their glacier has become a cause célèbre of the international global warming debate.
You can observe this kind of melting since the 80s. It's a dramatic melt of this kind of glaciers, the small glaciers.
In 1998, when his ski lift finally shut down, Chacaltaya was still 15 metres thick and losing 1 metre a year. That rate has since accelerated dramatically.
As you can see, we have only 3-4 meters.
How old is the ice we can see underneath here?
I think that maybe it's around 18,000.
18,000 years?
Maybe, yes.
How many years before all the glaciers around La Paz are gone?
It's around 20 years.
20 years?
20 years.
And they'll all be gone?
Yes.
For 2 million people living under the mountains in the cities of La Paz and El Alto, that means losing up to 60% of their water, which comes from glaciers. It's a huge dilemma for the entire Andes region, potentially affecting tens of millions of people.
It's a critical problem. It's the same problem for Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, all the Andes.
So we're talking about the drinking water for millions of people just going.
Yeah.
In downtown La Paz, there's no sense of a looming crisis. Nor is there any evidence of water restrictions. With 5 governments in just 5 years, crisis management is the norm, dealing with today's problems without worrying about next year. But in La Paz's twin city, the vast slums of El Alto, it's a very different matter. This is home for more than 1 million mainly indigenous people. As changing weather patterns cause crops to fail on the Andes high plain, they've been drawn to the city in search of work. The population is set to double in the next decade. Water, or lack of it, has always been an issue here.
No hay de dónde sacar agua. Traen del río de allá, que es Chacaltaya, y esa agua es sucia. Entonces ellos traen para vender eso acá, a la comunidad, al sector donde nosotros vivimos.
For Berna Cabrera, life is a daily struggle to provide for her family. After 7 years and at great expense, she finally saved enough to have a tap installed in her home. It often runs dry.
Cuando hacemos reuniones comunales, hablamos justamente del agua. Uno, que no tenemos alcantarillado porque no tenemos agua. ¿Para qué? Dice el alcalde mismo, dice, ¿para qué vamos a hacer alcantarillado si no tenemos agua?
A single mother, Berna Cabrera works as a nanny down in La Paz to support 3 generations of her family. She considers herself fortunate in having a job. Still, family discussion often centres on where they will get that basic necessity needed to sustain life.
Y cuando llueve, para nosotros es alegría porque chorrea de la calamina, ¿no? Entonces recibimos enturriles y ponemos lavandina y con eso los niños se lavan, comemos y todo.
Pero va a echar hasta aquí.
Like most Bolivians, Berna Cabrera never expected much help from government. She attends a typical community meeting. They're worried that there's just one tap for 200 people and their livestock. Water is already expensive, and with the glaciers melting, everyone is acutely aware that the price will rise even further. Some fear water will soon cost more than soft drink.
Por falta de agua, Coca-Cola, la damos y tomar. Mire, vacían las botellas, rápido, violento. ¿Necesitamos más Coca-Cola, no, señora? Sí. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? ¿Ya? ¿Eso no va a hacer? No hay agua.
Ningún gobierno se ha preocupado por nosotros en realidad. Nadie se ha preocupado por el agua. Nadie tampoco nos ha venido a preguntar qué tipo de sobrevivencia tenemos sobre el agua. Nadie, absolutamente nadie.
But a few people do worry. High above the city, Dr. Ramirez studies satellite imagery, plotting the glacier's decline and the looming water crisis.
Yeah, it's La Paz, El Alto.
Yeah. And when is the, if you like, the demand going to exceed the supply?
That's a very big problem because it's in 2009.
So in 2 years' time,
Yes,
you'll
yes.
start having a problem.
Yes,
And from then it'll just get worse.
yes.
Andes glaciers have all been in slow decline since a mini ice age here about 300 years ago. So what's causing the accelerated meltdown? Edson Ramirez says man-made carbon emissions are a factor. The question is, to what extent?
Que si bien hasta el momento no hemos podido, no se puede todavía cuantificar cuál es la proporción que el ser humano provoca sobre el cambio climático, pero sí sabemos de que estos efectos que provoca el hombre aceleran o juegan un rol de catalizador de estos ciclos.
He says the glaciers have been hit hardest by an unprecedented number of El Niños, the complex weather cycle triggered by warming and cooling of water at opposite ends of the Pacific Ocean.
Lo que hace que la masa caliente que está en el sector de Australia se desplace hacia la costa del Pacífico del sector peruano. Este efecto hace de que en la cordillera de los Andes y principalmente en Bolivia esté caracterizada por tener baja nubosidad, consecuentemente se tiene baja precipitación y alta radiación, lo que hace de que el glaciar, como vemos acá, pierda su característica de reflexión de la radiación.
Low rainfall means less snow, and it's snow which both replenishes the glacier and protects the ice from the harsh sun at such high altitude. Without the glaciers, scientists worry that the Andes highlands will have to depend on just 400 millimeters of rain a year. Then there's the problem of electricity. Sitting atop the spine of the Andes, this hydroelectric dam generates 80% of La Paz's power. It relies mainly on glacier runoff to drive the turbines. No water, no electricity.
The system of water provision for El Alto might collapse in the next 2 or 3 years.
Javier Gonzalez is a government climate change planner. He says Bolivia, the poorest country in South America, can't afford to build massive rain catchment dams. The task in this earthquake-prone zone is too complex and expensive.
The national greenhouse gas emissions is about 0.03% of the global emissions. And, but we have to bear the consequences of global warming.
Bolivia, he says, will pay a heavy price for a problem created by the industrialized world.
I'm very, very pessimistic of the situation at the international level. We know very well that the solution is through the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but not every country is committed to do this. The problem is being produced by industry nations, and we are facing the problems. We are facing the consequences of that.
Doesn't seem fair.
It's not fair at all.
Barely an hour's drive away from the parched streets of El Alto, the Aymaras celebrate the life-giving power of water. It's a festival marking the end of autumn and the harvesting of their crops. They live on the shores of Titicaca. This 8,300 square kilometre expanse is one of the world's great freshwater lakes. Recording the ceremony is Victor Hugo Ordóñez.
Obviamente el cambio climático está afectando bastante en la reducción de los glaciares y la falta de agua. Entonces, yo creo que hay una crisis y esa crisis no se está resolviendo hasta la fecha.
A member of Bolivia's now defunct Olympic ski team, he runs an eco-tourism company. More than 25 rivers feed from glaciers into the lake, which has just reached its annual high water mark. Victor Ordóñez worries that as the glaciers melt, the lake level will drop, and Titicaca's fragile environment will collapse, along with the livelihoods of these communities.
Para el lago Titicaca y para los propios ecosistemas que van hacia zonas de los valles, hay un gran problema. Para el lago Titicaca, siendo uno de los principales beneficiarios de agua hacia estas regiones.
Despite these concerns, one short-term fix being mooted is to draw drinking water from the lake. But Edson Ramirez says this would create even more problems.
Why can't you just pump water from Titicaca down to...
Because the quality of this water is not so good for human consumption.
Yeah. Why? The salt?
The salinity and mines.
Oh, contamination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bolivia has a centuries-long tradition of mining. It's a lucrative but deadly business for workers. Find an old mine head, and invariably, not far away, will be a lonely cemetery.
Now, as if the Bolivian government didn't have enough to worry about, there's another potential problem. The runoff from nearby glaciers come down into this dam here behind me, which forms part of the La Paz water supply. In fact, it provides some of the drinking water for the city. The only problem is they built a dam right next to this abandoned mine, which no one wants to take responsibility for. Contaminants have been flowing into this water supply for quite a while. The authorities say they've been able to deal with this problem. They filter them out downstream. The big fear now is that as the runoff from the glaciers decrease in the coming years, the concentration levels of contaminants are going to increase, and they won't be able to handle that problem. Why can't you simply have the mine demolished and have the site decontaminated?
It's difficult to deal with the sector, with the mining sector in Bolivia. The mining sector is a very strong sector in Bolivia, and environment is not as important yet.
No one is laughing in El Alto. For these people, global warming is more than just an abstract political debate. World leaders can argue about the cause and establish a complex system of carbon emissions trading. But Bolivians face the very real risk of becoming casualties of climate change.
Si yo trabajo, es gracias a Dios porque tengo un poco de dinero, pero hay gente que no tiene dinero. Es gente pobre. Gente muy pobre. Que no tiene a veces ni siquiera, como le digo, ni comprar una jarra de agua. A tal extremo llegamos de pobreza aquí.
We can change this phenomenon.
It's too late.
It's too late.
They're gone.
They're gone.
All of them.
All of the glaciers. It's very sad.
Up on the mountain, the Aymara priest offers up the fetus of a llama to the cleansing flame, sacrificed to the earth goddess Pachamama. Now he and the people of the Andes wait for their prayers to be answered.